It really is neighbourly, and we connect around probably the football club or a few of the other clubs around here. And so, it is, I think, more of a connection than what probably pre-COVID I had in other areas. Stephanie, what happens with new people who move into the area? Are they sort of initiated into the group? Is Wallace going to get an initiation when he comes into?
Well, he doesn't actually live on our street, but we do have things like people who used to live here. Some of the older people have gone into villages or into care or whatever, and they're still invited and they still come. So when new people come, it's not just, waving on the street. We've got our neighbourhood watch that will kind of go, okay, well, the house is obviously sold because we know what happens with the people who have left.
Stephanie, we're out of time. I'll continue the conversation when I see you at the street party in Torbay. Good on you. I'm Wallace Chapman. Mer Margaret Scott, kia ora to you both. I'm Wallace Chapman. Checkpoint is next.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Ea haere aki nei. New Zealand Rugby's dropped the ball. The domestic game is financially unstable and the organisation is not fit for purpose. We'll speak to the author of a scathing independent report. Migrant workers at the centre of an alleged fraud, ghosted by their employers and about to lose the roof over their heads. GP practices are ailing and the financial band-aid will need to be big, according to doctors. Is it a whopper of a lie? Claims the fast food chain is making its burgers look way bigger than they are in promo shoots. So we focus in on food photography and prepare to be mooned. It'll be big, bright and round, but not blue. You can watch us live on the RNZ website, Facebook and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Karen McCarthy. A report has found New Zealand Rugby's governance structure is not fit for purpose in the modern era. The panel that carried out the independent review reached its conclusions after widely consulting rugby stakeholders. New Zealand Rugby has been urged to make dramatic changes, and the chair of the review panel, Professional Director David Pilkington, believes it is prepared to make them.
There's no doubt they need change. I think by virtue of the fact that they commissioned together with the Players Association this review and the way that they've bought into it and, under the leadership of Dame Patsy, she's been very engaging and I think very supportive of having a fairly detailed, thorough and bold review.
David Pilkington says the different needs of the 26 provinces need to be taken into account when making decisions affecting the national game. The coroner will investigate deaths in New Zealand believed to be linked to a Canadian man charged with distributing substances to help people commit suicide. 57-year-old Kenneth Law is alleged to have sent lethal substances to people at risk of self-harm. Canadian police believe he sent at least 1,200 packages to more than 40 countries. The coroner's court here says it's received reports of deaths which are suspected to be linked to Mr Law's activities. It says the usual coronial inquiry process will be followed in relation to the deaths. Labour leader Chris Hipkins has stressed during the final debate of this parliamentary term there is a lot at stake in October's election. MPs have just participated in the adjournment debate, which marks the end of the 53rd Parliament. Mr Hipkins used his speech to describe the challenges the Labour government has faced over the last 3 years, including Cyclone Gabrielle and COVID-19. He says he's proud of the government's work.
We can go backwards or we can continue to move forwards. On this side of the House, we've got a positive vision for New Zealand's future and we will be campaigning vigorously.
Chris Hipkins says unprecedented events have defined the 53rd Parliament. Meanwhile, National Party leader Christopher Luxon made a surprising acknowledgement during his speech this afternoon. After thanking staff and Parliament Speaker, Mr Luxon thanked Mr Hipkins for his services to National.
He rode in very triumphantly in February and he announced that he was sweeping away everything that Jacinda Ardern stood for, especially kindness. But I have to say it turned out it was all words and no action because as we expected, he just carried on doing more of the same.
Christopher Luxon then continued his attack on Mr Hipkins, accusing him of not standing for anything. GPs are frustrated at the government's 10-year timeframe for reforming primary care, warning change will come too late for some. A survey this month by GenPro, which represents the owners of general practices and urgent care centres, found nearly 90% are under major financial strain and 35% made a loss in the last year. Its chair, Angus Chambers, says the plan signed off by Cabinet this week to make primary care more accessible is laudable, but doesn't include solutions. He says numerous reports show the funding model is flawed.
So, yeah, look, I'm perplexed. The crisis is real. The workforce issues are significant. There are already people who can't get GPs. There's many people who can't enrol in a general practice, and it's going to get worse, and yet they talk about more plans and more reviews, and they'll probably do a review of the review before they actually get around to doing anything.
Dr Chambers says funding to general practice needs to increase by 20 to 25% just to get stability. An orangutan at Auckland Zoo has inadvertently set off the sprinkler system. Fire and emergency went to the zoo shortly after midday. The zoo says 11-year-old Dyer set off the sprinklers inside the Southeast Asia jungle track high canopy habitat. She reportedly set off the alarm by knocking a sprinkler head. The zoo says there was never any danger to its 3 orangutans or staff and is looking into how it can prevent it happening again. In sport, Tall Blacks forward Jordan Ngatai believes they can compete with the best in the world, despite being knocked out of title contention at the Basketball World Cup. New Zealand's loss to Greece overnight ended their chances of progressing to the second round, with their focus now on sealing a place in June's qualifying tournaments for the 2024 Paris Olympics.
I have nothing but confidence in every single player in their locker room, in our coaching staff, in our support staff. Yes, we do have some things to work on, but my confidence never wavers with this group that we have.
The Tall Blacks now play 2 classification games starting tonight against Mexico. If they can win both and finish the World Cup as one of the 3 highest-ranked teams from Asia and Oceania, New Zealand will be awarded a spot in an Olympic qualifier series. Tonight's game tips off at 8:45. Black Caps batter Glenn Phillips concedes England are playing with a lot of intensity in their white ball cricket at the moment, but it's not something they can't overcome. England cruised to a 7-wicket win in the first T20 International in Durham this morning. Phillips says they don't need to take the same approach as the English cricketers.
We've got to come up and play our own game, understanding that they're going to keep coming, they're going to keep firing shots. They've got such long depth in their batting order, which, on another given day, our bowlers can definitely match up to their batters and vice versa, our batters to their bowlers.
Game 2 is in Manchester on Saturday morning. That's the news.
National defends its tax plan.
We've done our model. Then we checked it once, we checked it twice and had an external reviewer look at it.
Burger King is set to be flame grilled in court.
People don't necessarily expect every single burger that's going to be served to them to look exactly like the one that they see on the menu board.
And it's a once in a super blue moon lighting the night sky.
Confusingly has nothing to do with the colour. The moon is slightly closer to Earth than usual. A blue moon is simply when we have 2 full moons within a calendar month.
A whopper of a show. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Checkpoint and Lisa Owen next up after the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, mainly fine, isolated showers developing in Northland tomorrow morning, then spreading to northern Auckland and Coromandel late in the day. Showers turning to rain in the far north overnight Friday. Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Gisborne, mainly fine, isolated showers in Gisborne clearing this evening, then cloud increasing late tomorrow. Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, Waitomo to Wellington, including Tamaranui and Taihape. Areas of cloud from Taranaki to Wellington, with isolated light showers until the morning, otherwise fine. Bulla and Westland, cloudy periods, isolated showers in Westland. Fiordland, showers turning to rain tomorrow morning, heavy falls in the south. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago except Clutha. Mostly fine with frosts in the morning. Clutha and Southland mainly fine today. Scattered rain develops in the morning and the Chatham Islands cloudy periods. It's 5:07.
Nā mihi Karen, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā. The status quo is not an option. New Zealand Rugby's been handed a scathing review of the state of the game and its governance. It says NZR's structure is not fit for purpose and has an inability to make decisions to advance the game. The domestic rugby setup is described as financially unsustainable, with 26 provinces, which means 26 CEOs and 26 boards. Adding to the woes, the review says participation rates are static, if not declining. Spectator numbers are down for domestic rugby and fan engagement is under challenge. David Pilkington chaired the 4-person review panel and he joins us now. Kia ora, David.
Kia ora, Lisa.
Sounds a bit dysfunctional, is it?
Well, it's a system that is trying to preside over a business that has changed dramatically with the introduction of professional rugby, with the introduction of Silver Lake as an equity partner. And the challenges facing the game today need a different approach.
OK, well, let's look at some of the things you highlighted. Domestic competition financially untenable. So what do they need to do? Axe some provinces, amalgamate? What's the answer?
Well, we don't propose how the competition needs to change, other than the fact that, as we point out, New Zealand can't sustain, on a population of 5 million people, 19/20 professional rugby teams if we count Pacifica.
Well, what would happen if they continued on in that way then?
Well, they'll continue to place increasing dependence on the revenue earned from our teams in black. So it's fair to say that they've been able to grow the revenue, the advertising revenue from our All Black team, and that in large part goes to prop up all of the other activities throughout the game, none of which in their own right are financially sustainable. So steps have got to be taken to look at that. How could we change the format of the domestic game? How could we deal with this pressure that's coming, this economic pressure, and how I think to do that we need a board with the best capability we can muster.
OK, I want to get to capabilities in a second, but if change is required to be financially sustainable, why is New Zealand Rugby not making those decisions now? Are they afraid or incompetent?
Well, I think what they're doing now is very much bound by their constitution, because the constitution of New Zealand Rugby in its current form is very complicated down to the point of describing the way in which directors are appointed onto the board. That process in of itself is complicated. I think it deters a lot of good people from putting themselves forward to go onto that board. But New Zealand Rugby are stuck with that until they get a change in the constitution along the lines we're advocating.
OK, so what are your concerns about the makeup of the board as it currently stands?
There's two elements to that. One is, a good commercial board basically has a skills matrix which sets out, what is the combination of skills, knowledge and experience we need around the board to give us the best possible standard of governance and capability to deal with the challenges. So it's about that process of bringing together the best possible people. At the moment, as I say, the convoluted process of appointment prevents a lot of those skills being attracted to join the board.
So I'm just wondering, is it a popularity contest rather than a professional contest? You also single out the fact that women, and I'm reading from the report here, women do not have the time or enthusiasm to put themselves through the politicking associated with board elections. There was a consistent view that women have zero chance of getting onto the NZR board through the current elected or nominated routes. So in most cases, they don't bother. You also point out the lack of Māori and Pacifica in decision-making positions. So what's the problem? Racism and sexism?
Well, no, I wouldn't put it that bluntly. I think what happens is that you've got a system where most of the nominations and most of the vetting of who goes onto the board comes via a process dominated by our provincial unions. And it's only natural that those people want people that look like them and sound like them. And I think the process we're proposing is to say, no, let's step away from that. Let's look at the skills required and let's get a professional appointments panel that ensures that the people go on have the skills and capability of dealing with these range of challenges they face.
So, David, if you only want people who look and sound like you, isn't that bias or one of the isms?
Well, whether it's a deliberate bias or a consequence of the way the process works, either way, they're not getting the best people to put themselves forward.
You highlight the fact that participation rates are easing off and, viewership on the sidelines and all the rest of it. So have people actually, do we like rugby anymore? Have people fallen out of love with the game? Is the heyday over?
I think certainly for a lot of people, they find there's far too much rugby on TV. When Wellington plays a Ranfurly Shield Challenge in front of about 3,000 people at Hutt Rec, it's telling you something about the spectator interest in the game. I mean, that would have been unheard of 10 years ago. Frankly, I think people are busy. There's a lot more options in terms of what people do in their leisure time and what they watch. And I think it is fair to say that for a lot of people, they have been turned off watching rugby in the same way they used to. It is fair to say, however, that viewer numbers through television haven't declined anywhere near as much as the spectator attendance at stadia. So, people are happier to watch rugby. If they're going to watch rugby from their own home, they can go to a cold, dark stadium and on a Friday or Saturday night.
Interesting to talk to you, David. Thank you so much for joining us. That is David Pilkington, who chaired that 4-person panel who wrote that report on the state of New Zealand rugby and its governance. It is 14 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Migrant workers allegedly caught up in an immigration fraud and living in overcrowded conditions could soon be without any roof over their heads and zero income. Earlier this week, Immigration New Zealand inspected several houses across Auckland amid a review of the accredited employers scheme. Minister Andrew Little ordered the review after getting an anonymous email claiming employers in the scheme weren't being properly vetted. It's alleged dozens of mainly Bangladeshi men living at 2 houses in Linfield and Glen Eden paid around $20,000 each to get visas and work under the scheme. But when they got here, the jobs vanished. Their employer has also stopped supplying food, and men in one of the houses have to vacate in about 2 weeks. But they are caught in financial limbo because they're unable to work for anyone else until they're issued with new visas. Masood Alam, an advocate with immigration law firm Amerins, has been helping the men, and he joins us now. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
How have these men been treated by their employer?
Sorry, am I speaking with Lisa?
You are.
Well,
welcome to
Lisa.
Checkpoint.
Welcome. Thanks for allowing me to speak on behalf of those exploited migrant. So, what was your question again?
How do you think that these men have been treated by the companies and employers who offered them work and in essence encouraged them to come to the country?
Well, these unfortunate victims were exploited very badly by, from day one by these scam companies, whatever you call it, as an employer. So prior to coming here, they were doing well in Singapore, working as welders, fabricators, carpenters, electricians, even crane operators. Then the agent of those, scammers, they actually promised them that, look, we have a similar job in New Zealand, which will pay you at least 6 to 7 times more than what you're earning right now, which is around $30 per hour. So these false promises were sold to them for a price ranging from $20,000 to $25,000 per victim. And as you can imagine, many of those victims have to borrow money to afford such a premium. But upon arrival, unfortunately, they discovered that the company they were supposed to work for and earn that promised $30 per hour had scammed them. And
so do these companies actually exist, Masood? Do they exist, companies? Are they real?
Without being real in paperwork, they're only actually able to, get them here because in order to, offer such a job and enable these victims to get genuine work visa, they must be, in paper. For example, they were registered in the company's office and they were They had the IID number, they had the business bank account, such, and a lot of other paperwork behind them. But unfortunately, when they were actually abusing the immigration system in order to plot such a scam, and it was really in a large scale, as you can imagine, over 100 people. So if you count at least 20 to 25,000 per victim, it's looked like a lot of winning for them.
So what are the conditions like where these men have been living? Do they have food? Has anyone paid any wages to them?
No. Look, they're actually currently utterly unprepared for such a situation. So you can imagine that they don't know who is going to provide their next meal and who is actually going to pay for their rent, because they come here with a confirmed job that will pay them $30 per hour. Unfortunately, that's, utterly distressful for them, and they actually living in such a poor condition. You can imagine that such living condition exists in a country where the human rights does not even exist. But unfortunately, we are seeing, we are witnessing something similar here in New Zealand. That is really sad to see.
So what are their prospects for work? Because you say they've actually got skills. They're welders and they're skilled construction workers, right? And we're short of workers. So one imagines that there may be other companies who are interested in them. But can they work for other companies?
Look, at the moment, as you may aware, that when they come for a company, they must work for that company. So unless immigration actually, allow them with an open work visa, for as long as for a duration as long as their visa have, so they will be able to work. But unfortunately, I don't think it is at the moment. It is an option for them. So
is that what they are hoping for? That they will be granted other visas in the interim?
Yes. So they are hoping that the government will actually, considering this situation, that the government will offer them an open work visa that will allow them to work for anyone, for anywhere, for any occupation. But as I say, look, these guys actually not just an unskilled migrant. They have work in their respective fields, like as a welder, fabricators, carpenter, for at least 5 years in average, and also crane operators. That you can imagine that such a skill is really demandable here in New Zealand.
Has any of them, and even you, have you seen the boss of the company that was supposed to have employed them? Have you seen a single staff member from the company that they're supposed to be working for?
No, because after knowing their story, what we understand that they left New Zealand. I don't know, because based on the video that they had shown to us, that the bosses that they are supposed to work for, he just send them a video message telling them, look, I know this is bad and I can't afford to do, and I'm not here even in New Zealand. He left the country.
Right. So what has happened to their money? Because there's quite a few of these workers, right, tens and tens of them, and if they each paid around $20,000 each for visas, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where's the money going?
Yeah, so it was actually collected by their brokers who lived in Bangladesh or in Singapore, and they have actually collected those money. And what was actually the sharing condition, we didn't know, but we think that because the job offer was not genuine, then the director or the owner of the company must have a share in it. Otherwise, there's no point for him to issue these fake employment agreement.
So just to be clear, you suspect the allegation is that agents working in the countries these men were living in take a fee and then they split it with the shell company that is employing them and never gives them a real job. That's how they make their money.
Yes, that's actually what the storytelling indicating us, because otherwise why you will issue the job offer or employment agreement without really you need them. So there must be some sort of arrangement between those agents and the scam company. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. It is not. So, the story indicates that, yes, that's actually what had happened.
Thank you so much for your time. Best of luck with this particular case. That's Masood Alam, who is an advocate. He works with an immigration firm that is trying to help these workers who have come in on accredited worker schemes, only to find that the jobs do not exist. It's a major turnaround. Qantas has responded to a public outcry and removed the expiry dates of COVID travel credits, which were due to run out at the end of this year. Qantas customers can now request a cash refund, and Jetstar customers can use their COVID vouchers for flights indefinitely. Qantas CEO Alan Joyce says the company has heard customers' complaints.
We're doing this because we've listened. We know the credit system was not as smooth as it should have been. And while we've improved it recently and extended the expiry date several times, people lost faith in the process. We hope this helps change that. We also hope that a lot of people still choose to put their credit towards their next journey.
Australia's competition regulator is taking legal action against Qantas for allegedly advertising and selling tickets for more than 8,000 flights it had already cancelled but not removed from sale. And we'll have more on that later in the program. It is 23 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We are keen to hear from you. Homai or Whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. What do you think the future of rugby is in New Zealand? Domestic game, not financially sustainable, according to a new and rather scathing report. And the board structure, not fit for purpose either. You can text us on 2101 with your thoughts on that one, or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to the headlines now. Ane a Karen Mina Pitspiti.
A review is urging New Zealand Rugby to make dramatic changes after finding its governance structure not fit for purpose and unable to make decisions for the benefit of the game. The four-person panel says the current 26-province domestic setup is financially unsustainable and participation rates are static, if not falling. Review Chair David Pilkington told Checkpoint the business had changed dramatically and the best people weren't putting themselves forward. About 50 migrant workers in 2 Auckland houses are in limbo after allegedly each paying around $20,000 under the accredited employers scheme, only to arrive and be given no work. Their employer has vanished and is no longer paying their rent, and the mainly Bangladeshi men are unable to work for anyone else until they are issued with new visas. A Canadian man charged with distributing substances to help people commit suicide is being linked to deaths in New Zealand. Canadian police believe Kenneth Law sent at least 1,200 packages to more than 40 countries. Parliament has ended its 53rd term ahead of October's election. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins told the final debate that he's proud of the government's work in the face of unprecedented events such as Cyclone Gabrielle and COVID-19. And tropical storm Idalia has hit the US state of South Carolina after causing widespread destruction on the Gulf Coast of Florida and flooding in Georgia. The storm has been downgraded from a hurricane. On the traffic front, Auckland's North Shore, a multi-vehicle crash is blocking the right northbound lane just prior to Oteha Valley Road off-ramp on the Northern Motorway, State Highway 1. Pass with care and expect delays until that's cleared. And expect roadwork closures across Auckland's motorway network tonight, including a full closure of northbound lanes on State Highway 1 between East Tamaki Road and Mount Wellington tonight. We'll have more news headlines and any traffic updates for you around 20 to 6.
Ngā mihi, Karen. A whopper of a lie or greedy diners with big expectations. Burger King's landed in court over its marketing for the Whopper burger. Central to the dispute is whether the chain's in-store menu boards are so misleading in their depiction of the burger that it is a breach of contract. Customers in the proposed class action claim that Burger King portrays its burgers with ingredients that overflow the bun, making it look at least a third bigger than it is, with more than double the meat than it actually has. Top food stylist Fiona Hughes joins us now. Hi, Fiona.
Hey, Lisa, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I mean, you would be an observer of this as a stylist, so I'm wondering, how realistic do you reckon the depictions are of these delicious burgers, not just in this particular chain, across the board, versus the reality?
Well, across the board, if we're working on a campaign, I've usually got a bank of people from clients through to agency people that are telling me, no, that's the percentage of lettuce you have to put in that burger. So we're always pretty tight on a real depiction of what the burger will be when you're ripping through your drive-through and getting it in a hurry.
Because the thing is, like this case, the complainants are saying when you look at the picture, it's just oozing with sauces. It's oozing with lettuce and pickle and a yummy patty of some nature. And then you get the thing and it's sort of squashed and small and doesn't look anything like it.
It's fast food, Lisa. It's delivered to you fast. They don't have the time to place the sesame seeds and align the lettuce leaves in the patty like I do. So it's kind of expected.
Okay, talk us through that process. Are you actually doing that? Are you positioning lettuce leaves and, dribbling mayo in the right places?
Yeah, absolutely. Because firstly, we eat with our eyes, right? And everyone wants to, look at that burger and the client wants them to feel hungry and go out and buy the burger because it's about selling the food, right, what I produce. We do tricky little things like paint a little bit of oil on the patty to make it look super juicy, but it is the actual patty that is delivered in store. So if I go to a shoot like that, I'm usually delivered all the ingredients by Burger King or by KFC or whoever the fast food chain is, and we go through and select the best looking ones because again, it's about what looks the greatest. And then when it's on camera, we do little things like spritz the lettuce or put a little dewdrop on the tomato slice so that it looks juicy and unctuous. And, inevitably that the viewer will go, oh, my God, I need that burger now, and drive to the fast food outlet and buy it. So, yeah, there's lots of things we do.
Do you use any food substitutes? Because this is something that is talked about a lot on social media. Is mash spud used for ice cream? Are there substitutes? What are the tricks of the trade?
I personally don't. I honestly style things as it is with the ingredients that are there, just make them look super good with little tricks. But, you can, if you're doing, say, a campaign where ice cream is not the feature of the campaign, but it's in there and you need it to last a long time, absolutely, there's stylists that will use mashed potato in place of ice cream. But for me, I'm usually selling that ice cream and it just doesn't look the same if you don't use the product that you're actually selling. So I always make sure that, we're honestly portraying what is in the pack that the customer's going to pick up at the supermarket.
So that's you, but have you seen in the industry the use of things, what people call colloquially, spitting that one out, spaces, to make the burger look like it's sort of higher and bigger than what it really is?
Depending on where the camera is, we'll tilt the lid of the bun or adjust things slightly. But, most of the shoots, pretty much all of the shoots that I've been on, there is a percentage of lettuce, there's a percentage of cheese and a percentage of mayo or sauce that needs to be seen so that it is realistic to what the customer is actually buying.
Here's the thing though, Fiona, we all know from real estate pictures, for example, rooms can be made to look huge, right? Different angles, different lighting. So size is key to this court case in America. Is food made to look more enormous than it actually is?
Totally depends on the campaign, I think. But, it doesn't look like the fast food slapped in a hurry, in the 30 seconds that you're driving through the drive-thru. It's never going to look like that. I've got time to place things. I've got time to stack things carefully so that it looks delicious. Because, if it looks crappy, no one's going to buy the burger, are they?
No, which makes me think, you call it, it's your profession. Do you reckon the stuff looks better in the photos than it is in reality? Looks more attractive?
100%. That's what my job is, to make it look good. 9 times out of 10, it looks like it, but it doesn't look exactly the same for sure.
It's a better version of itself.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Really fun to talk to you. Thank you for that. That's Fiona Hughes, who's a top food stylist there, talking about how they photograph food and burgers. Let us know what you think on that one. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Do you reckon the burgers, or the takeaways, whether it's a burger or not, appears bigger and better in the photographs? Is it a true depiction, or are they are they selling you a pup? Let us know your thoughts. It is 29 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa NINA. Ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins us in the studio to talk business. What's your first topic, Nona?
I was going to talk about burgers, but no, let's not bother. Yeah.
All right.
Well, later on we could talk about burgers. We'll see.
Made you peckish?
Yeah. It really did. I was looking at those food pictures and I thought, yum.
Food porn. That's what they call it. Anyway.
That's what it looks like.
So Consumer New Zealand to move to,
Let's get on to the business of business, right? Okay, yeah. Consumer New Zealand thinks that the electricity industry is broken. It needs to be reviewed because the 4 big power companies, that's Meridian, Contact, Mercury, and what is the other one, Genesis, are making underlying profits of about $2.7 billion in the year just ended. They're saying that's a lot of money.
2.7 billion.
Yeah. They are saying it's about $7.4 million a day that's clicking through there. And at the same time, a lot of households are finding it really difficult. 19% of households have gone without power or have had trouble paying their bill. And 12% of households have actually cut out power at times just to save money. And so they're saying, look, 25 years we've had this current industry framework in place. It's time to review it, put something different in place, because it seems that electricity, the pricing isn't working for consumers. They're not benefiting as much as they should, that power prices are too high, and they're not really getting better. We do have an expectation that prices will continue to rise, especially as the power companies invest more for climate change mitigation and all sorts of others. I mean, at some stage you would think it would get cheaper, but it might not be for a long time.
Okay, let's ask the viewers. 2101 on text. What are you seeing in your power bills? Let us know how your prices are going this winter. Is it putting the squeeze on you? Hey, we're almost at spring, so hopefully it will ease
tomorrow.
Off. Okay. Business confidence. You're confident about spring. Business confidence is picking up. What does the latest survey tell us?
Okay, so we've moved to the highest level in 2 years in terms of business confidence. Okay. Wow, but it's still negative. Look at that look on your face. Yeah. Okay, so still negative. Okay, so we went up 9 points in July, but now we're a negative 4 points. We're still below the I'm kind of positive about the outlook. However, businesses were much more positive about their own outlook.
So they're gloomy, but not as gloomy as they have been.
They're still gloomy.
Yes.
But not as gloomy as that's exactly right. And for when their own outlook is looked at, they think that it's actually become a positive reading. So good. I mean, they came up 10 points. It's now a positive reading of 11. It's still not stellar, but, it's not bad. Now, why? Well, they've got a sense that inflation is easing. So this is making businesses feel a bit more confident as well. The labor market is also easing up. You've got more population growth, and you've got potentially a flattening of the housing market, that we've actually hit the bottom. So all of these things combined is giving business some confidence. We'll see how it goes, though, because there's lots of risks ahead. And what if they're wrong? What if inflation hasn't been tamed and the Reserve Bank has to back up and raise interest rates? There's a lot of concern, not just here in New Zealand, about the state of play, but also internationally. And that we're seeing in, of course, our own markets, too.
Okay, joggers on for a sprint through the market.
Okay, so the top 50 index, it ended up 1/3%, nearly 33-point gain to 11,554. That's pretty good, because in the Asia-Pacific region, things were not as good. It was set for the worst month since February. Sentiment is down because of the gloomy outlook for China. And there's a lot of concern about what's happening with the U.S. So where we ended up with the dollar is 59.6 U.S. cents, 91.9 Australian. So that's a little change from yesterday. But what is interesting is that 46.8 British pence. So we've dropped there. And that's because there's inflation running high in some parts of Europe, which makes people feel that there may be some interest rate hikes there.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with Business News. Stilt houses could be the answer to avoiding rising tides and floodwaters, according to a report for NIWA. The research by Cost Construction Experts, WT Partnership, found for some homes, lifting them 2 metres off the ground could be a cost-effective climate change mitigation. Now, some residents in Auckland are already moving onto stilts as a result of this year's extreme weather events. And joining us now with more details on this latest report is NIWA scientist Dr. Christou Rothenbar, who joins us now. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thanks for having me.
Hey, how cost effective is this?
That's a loaded question, right? The report found that in lifting some timber and pile construction houses by up to 2 meters, which is actually quite a lot, could be more cost effective than building a new house. But in general, the costs are dependent on a lot of factors, right? So if there's a flood or if there's intermittent flooding, the odds that infrastructure leading to your house gets compromised as well is also very important to consider, and the original cost of your house. So if your house is already kind of old or maybe dilapidated, is it worth lifting it? So it's a loaded question. And what we've aimed to do with this report is add some clarity to a very complex problem.
Exactly. In terms of cost effectiveness, if the two comparisons are abandoning your house or building a completely new one versus this, presumably the stilts is always going to win out on price, even if it's expensive.
Not necessarily always. I think it's because there's different measures of value, right? So it's not just always monetary. It could be that your connection to the land is so strong that you're like, oh, okay, monetary-wise, maybe it's more cost effective to move, but I really don't want to abandon where I live, But other things that needs to be considered is that this isn't a solution to sea level rise, right? So what this can do is it can be an option to buy some time while proper adaptation plans are considered, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not a forever solution. It's potential that these people would have to retreat even further.
Yeah, it's buying time. And it's definitely...
How much, Christo, do you think?
Oh, that depends on where you are. So our study really focuses on rural landscapes. So where our program, Future Coast Aotearoa, is not focused on urban areas. And different... little communities are at different levels of risk. So, for example, if you're close to a river or estuary mouth, you're at threat from both oceanic-driven and river-driven flooding, and the compound of it. So these things can also occur together. So risk does vary. And unfortunately, the ground beneath our feet is also moving, right? So some places are going down, some other places are going up. If you're going up, great, you're getting a bit more time, but there's no universal answer, unfortunately.
And this is only useful in certain types of construction when it comes to houses. If you've got a brick house, it's not going to work for you. So do you have any idea of the number of homes that this might be useful for?
Sure. So that is what we will call So we've got this tool called Riskscape, which really helps us answer those type of questions from a geographic perspective. But to put a number on the amount of houses is a bit difficult at this point. Like I mentioned, it's a very loaded question and problem. And to tally up houses based on just their footprint isn't really a good measure. But almost all low-lying communities behind seawalls, behind dune systems in coastal lowlands will have to start thinking about coastal adaptation options. And it's very heartening to know that so many councils and regional councils across New Zealand is being very proactive in planning how we're going to deal with these problems.
Thank you so much for your time. That is NIWA scientist Dr. Christo Rotenbach there with that report about whether it's possible to raise up houses at risk, put them on stilts, go up rather than moving out. It is 20 minutes away from 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai or whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening, whether it is the future of rugby in New Zealand, exploitation of migrant workers. Also interested in your thoughts there on putting houses on stilts as a mitigation for climate change. It's not a forever solution, as we heard there, but it could buy people extra time if they feel attached to their property and the land. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now with Karen. Anea Karen, mina pita kōrero.
An independent review has found New Zealand Rugby's governance structures are not fit for purpose in the modern era and reform is needed. Review panel chair David Pilkington told Checkpoint there needed to be an independent process to ensure the appointment of an appropriately skilled, high-performing New Zealand Rugby board. Early childhood education teachers are disappointed the government has not guaranteed funding to maintain future pay parity. Associate Education Minister Joe Luxton says it will match the pay increases won by kindergarten and school teachers, but salary increases after December will need to be determined in future budgets. During his final speech at Parliament before the election, National leader Christopher Luxon has thanked Labour leader Chris Hipkins for his services to the National Party. He said Mr Hipkins was all words and no action and was continuing the policies of his predecessor Jacinda Ardern. John Turkington Forestry has confirmed a person died yesterday at its Palmerston North branch after being hit by a vehicle. Founder John Turkington says the company is helping police and WorkSafe investigations. A high-speed train has killed 5 railway workers in Italy as they carried out maintenance work near Turin. 2 other members of the crew narrowly escaped. And the US Department of Health and Human Services is calling on the Drug Enforcement Agency to loosen federal rules on cannabis, which is legal in some form in 40 out of 50 states. Cannabis is currently listed in the same class as heroin and LSD. On the traffic front, a little mayhem north of Auckland on State Highway 1, the Northern Motorway. Expect big delays northbound due to a truck that rolled a little while ago between Otaha Valley Road and Silverdale. Some reports say northbound traffic has backed up kilometres from Silverdale through to Albany, compounded by another multi-car crash which has blocked lanes nearby. Could be slow going heading home. And Otago, State Highway 6, Lake Hayes, a multi-vehicle crash near the intersection of State Highway 6 and Old School Road is causing a bit of bother. Road users advised to expect significant delays in the area. We'll have all the latest news at 6.
Thank you, Karen. Let's get to some of your feedback now. It's coming in regarding the rugby. A lot of you comparing union and league. This person says, rugby need to look at league. The cost of taking the family to a rugby game is more than double a league game. And guess which is more fun? It attracts a good cross-section and it's always fun, that listener says. This one in too from John, who says, the Wars don't have a problem getting people to their games at night. Face it, union is boring. And another says, time to make women's football the national game. A listener's got in touch about the migrants who don't have jobs when they've turned up here, even though there was a commitment when they got their visas. This is a horrific situation with migrant workers being left high and dry and is effectively government-sanctioned people smuggling. I'm embarrassed to be a New Zealander, says Dorothy. And Steve's got in touch. Steve says, Lisa, the burger picture and the reality is like comparing your morning face with your work makeup face. It's the same beautiful person inside. Thanks for the feedback, Steve. When you say your morning face, are you referring to me specifically or just people generally? Thank you for your feedback. 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Parliament have signed off for the term with a traditional adjournment debate. A testy week full of cuts, censures and claims of fiscal holes has finally come to a close, with MPs now led off into the wild to contest the election. Here's our political reporter, Giles Dexter.
The last day of school started with a squabble. Labour came out swinging, trying to poke further holes in National's tax plan, this time on how much revenue it says it could gather from taxing offshore online gambling operators. Barbara Edmonds and Kieran McAnulty claimed National was $130 million off.
Your numbers don't add up.
Yeah, and it's easy to prove that if they do, just show us your assumptions. They don't add up. They require 4 times the number of Kiwis to gamble overseas. Show us the numbers.
Nicola Willis, seeing a press pack already set up, swooped in afterwards, saying Labour's actually got it wrong.
They're throwing some stuff at the wall. They've actually got their base assumptions wrong. They're looking at GST, we're looking at corporate tax and casino levies. They're only looking at the currently registered market, we're looking at the black market, and they are failing to account for the significant growth that is occurring in this market.
Going to the final question time, MPs were quietly reflective.
We've made a huge difference with the government that we've been dealt, and we're looking forward to being a more central part of government in the next term.
But whew, what a ride it's been, eh? It's been a big 3 years.
That quiet reflection lasted approximately 5 seconds. With this year's election promising to be feisty, nobody wanted to get out of here without one final scrap.
The most surprising thing about that question was that Nicola Willis's lips didn't move while he was asking it.
An opportunity for the government to stand on its record, for the opposition to test the government on it, and for everyone to test the Speaker's patience.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, by golly. Don't make me send you out on the last day. No more chances.
Chris Hipkins kicked off the adjournment debate and reminded people what has happened over the last 3 years. Since then, there's been unprecedented lockdowns, unprecedented weather events, and unprecedented leadership changes.
Mr. Speaker, ours is a government that has been forged through fire. Every challenge that has been thrown our way, we have risen to that. We have responded to an enormous number of challenges whilst also being very focused on making sure that in our actions we are laying the foundations for a better future for our country.
Christopher Luxon embraced the lightheartedness of the debate, but didn't shy away from a few digs.
And I do want to thank in particular the Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, for his services to the National Party, because he rode in very triumphantly in February and he announced that he was sweeping away everything that Jacinda Ardern stood for, especially kindness.
Some of the other speakers got a bit weird.
And I had 2 grand puppies.
Up the wires, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, to quote the words of Shrek.
It's clearly time for everyone to get out of here. Roll on the election.
And that was Giles Dexter reporting. It is 12 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The skies above New Zealand will be lit up by a very rare blue moon tonight, the likes of which you won't see again for a long time. While blue moons are actually fairly common, for one to coincide with a supermoon, as is set to happen tonight, is something that really does only happen once in a blue moon. Otago Museum Director and astronomer Dr. Ian Griffin is here to tell us more. Hi Ian, as an astronomer, this must really spin your wheels. Excited?
Yes, I mean, it's something that's just going to be quite interesting to observe. So I'm atop the Otago Peninsula here. It's a beautiful night down here in the deep south. So I'm hoping when the moon rises in about 10-15 minutes to get a really good view of this relatively rare event.
Explain to us what will happen, at what time, and what do you expect to see?
Well, basically, a supermoon is when the moon is actually relatively close to us, so it's slightly bigger than an average moon in the sky. And tonight's moon's going to be about 15% brighter and 7% bigger than the average full moon. And of course, the blue moon has got nothing to do with the colour. It's the second full moon in a month, and that's called a blue moon. And the last time a supermoon and a blue moon coincided was 2009, and the next time won't be until August 2032, which I'm pretty sure I won't see that one. I'm a bit old. So I thought I'd go up tonight and celebrate the event and find a really beautiful spot to sit. And as I say, the ocean is completely calm. I could hopefully see the moon pop up above the sea in about 10 or 15 minutes from down here. So I'm getting very excited.
OK, so did you see the one in 2009?
I don't think I did, because I was living in America at the time and I think it was cloudy. So not the greatest thing to do.
OK, so tonight should be the night. So how long will it last? Is it just a one-night wonder?
Well, technically, the actual moment of full moon was during the day here in New Zealand. It's about 1:30 this afternoon. That was the exact moment of the moon being opposite the sun in the sky. But basically, this morning and this evening are 2 of the best times to kind of see it and say you actually got to see it. So that's what we're all doing up here.
Tell me, does everybody see it the same in different parts of the country, or is there a better spot than others?
Well, anywhere you can see the moon, you can tick this one off your to-do list. But as long as the sky is clear and you see the moon, you can say you've seen it. Now, I love watching the moon rise when it's low in the sky. It's really beautiful. You sometimes get distortion effects, and you get the red colour as well sometimes because the light is absorbed. So seeing the moon low in the sky, I think, is my personal favourite. But, of course, later in the evening, the moon will be relatively high in the sky and everybody all over the country should see it.
So, Ian, are there many other people skulking around like you to get a glance at it?
Well, there's one car that's skulking a little bit. I mean, I'm in a pretty remote spot up here at the southern end of the Otago Peninsula. There's a little white car that's been getting closer and closer, so I'm getting a bit scared. But I think it's just the photographer rather than someone who's going to kind of...
Anything sinister. Have you got snacks? Have you got a thermos? Are you well prepared? I can hear a bit of wind, Ian. I don't want you to get cold out there looking at the moon.
No, it is surprisingly windy up here, down by near the lighthouse at the end of the peninsula. So, no, I'm going to go home and have my supper later, I hope. But let's get the moon in first. That's the big one. I don't want to miss that because, as I say, 2032 is a long way off.
Hey, just before you go, are you a believer that spooky things happen when there's a full moon?
No, I'm an astronomer, not an astrologer. No, definitely not.
Hey, good luck. I hope the view is spectacular. That is Dr. Ian Griffin there, who's the Otago Museum Director, and he's an astronomer and he is out there waiting for the blue moon, which he was saying, was it about 6 minutes past 6, that he reckons is going to be the best view of it. If you're out there, good luck, and text us when you see it. A University of Auckland Waka armour team full of first-time paddlers will be competing at the world's largest long-distance canoe race in Hawaii this week. The team of engineering students will face off against more than 5,000 paddlers, including the best teams in the world, over the next 4 days. Ashley McCall reports.
For the last 5 months, the University of Auckland's Waka armour team has been training hard in preparation for the Queen Lele'uakalani canoe race in Hawaii. The competition is named in honour of the island's last reigning monarch. The team has 3 races, their longest being nearly 30 kilometres between Kailua and Honono. Many of the team are either completely new to Waka armour or have hardly any experience, like 21-year-old Manamia Kotika. Nonetheless, she says she'll keep paddling hard even when she's exhausted.
If I'm just fatigued and I just feel like I'm dying in the boat, I have to keep going for my team and being able to support them in the boat and just having their back. We could just feel just completely drained at one point in the race, but just being there for one another is quite important to us, and just that respect that we have for each other.
It's been 4 years since the university has been able to participate in the competition because of COVID. Preparing for the event has come with lots of sacrifices for paddlers like Manamia, who's had to learn how to balance training with her final year of uni. She says the sport has helped keep her linked to her whenua.
Waka is a big sport in the Cook Islands, and I never got the opportunity to partake back home. So I guess during COVID times, just being able to be out on the water it helped me a lot, actually. I just felt connected to home.
23-year-old Sunny Verko is doing his PhD in engineering and hasn't picked up a paddle for the last 6 years. He says learning different mind techniques while training off the water has been crucial to getting ready.
On the water, obviously there's the harbour, there's all of the maunga, there's the CBD with all the buildings, there are the fishermen to keep your mind occupied. But in the gym on the erg, you're just literally looking at a wall for 3 hours. So building that resilience firstly before going over kind of makes it easier.
To get through the gruelling races, he'll need to stay focused.
I guess the excitement, the anticipation, the energy over there, I expect that it might be easy for everything to be really overwhelming and for everything to maybe go out the window. So one of my goals is just to stay locked in and stick to the game plan and obviously try have fun at the same time.
25-year-old coach Georgia Naida is no stranger to the competition, having previously won gold for the university. This is the moment in 2018 that Georgia and her team performed a haka with paddles in their hands. It'll be her 4th time going back, and she's feeling nostalgic about it.
You're going through it with people who are studying the same degree as you. Often you guys are going through the same sort of struggles at the same time, and you're in the same mindset, I guess. This race and the campaigns that I've done for this race, they hold a special place in my heart for sure.
This time she'll be returning as Hawaii mourns those lost in the recent wildfires on Maui. Georgia says the team will try to figure out how to give back to help tautoko the kānaka Māori.
I was talking to management about, hey, is there anything we can do? I'd really like to be a part of that opportunity while we're there. We're going to be mindful that a lot of the other paddlers who are there, their whānau and their ohana is probably going to be mamai. Yeah, they're probably going to be impacted. And just the nation itself is going to be impacted. Just being aware of that and knowing what's surrounding us while we're over there.
While they're over there, the team will not only aim for gold, but also provide a cloak of aroha to raise the spirits of Maui ohana.
Let's head to India now. Monkeys are often spotted roaming around government sites in the Indian capital, much to the annoyance of the local authorities, as it prepares to host the G20 summit of world leaders in September. The city is reverting to a tried and tested method to stop them bothering people. But the plan is quite a noisy one, as BBC's Chantal Hartle explains.
This is the sound of a langur monkey, a large, black-faced, long-tailed primate known for its unusual barking call. For decades, trained handlers would take langurs into public spaces to scare away Delhi's smaller monkeys to make sure that major events ran smoothly. That practice ended due to animal welfare laws. So, New Delhi's municipal council has gone for the next best thing, hiring around 30 men tasked with mimicking the sounds of the langur monkey. A council official said one man would be deployed at each hotel where G20 delegates are staying, as well as other popular monkey spots. So, how realistic will it be? Here's one impersonator who was employed previously to stop monkeys bothering bureaucrats around the Indian Parliament.
This is to scare the monkey away. The monkey thinks a langur is around the corner, and this one, and then this one. That's to scare them away. We mix all three sounds so the monkeys think that a man has come with a langur.
The authorities are also putting up cardboard cutouts of the macaque's more menacing relatives in parts of the city. But some are sceptical about how effective this will be. The animals have a reputation for being quick to spot these tricks. Previously, a fake plastic model of a langur monkey with its distinct loud noise lasted only 3 days before macaques tore it to pieces.
OK, let's get to some of your feedback before the news at 6 on rugby. This person says the problem for rugby isn't at the governance level, but on the pitch. It is now a game of strength and power rather than skill. Oh, for the good old days, says Peter. Someone else has got in touch. This was about diversity on the board. The report indicates that there's not enough of it. And this listener says, we're all biased. If rugby had more women on their boards, then that would improve diversity due to women also choosing people who look and sound like them. On the issue of migrants who have visas linked to approved employers and they get here and the jobs don't exist, this person says, these people duping migrant workers, are they originally from the same countries as the workers they are exploiting? This happened to the island workers under the slavery person who was found guilty. They were from the Pacific. It is so sad. I hope these individuals are pursued by the authorities who appear to have turned a blind eye, says Anne. On the subject of burgers, burger advertising is just like how real estate agents smarten a house up and use a wide-angle lens to make the room look bigger. This one, the key difference is the bright and clear lighting and advertising and photos compared to the half-light dinginess of the drive-through. And on the blue moon, Mike's got in touch to say, so the blue moon is the source of the saying once in a blue moon, meaning a rare thing. This has just dawned on me, says Mike. Better late than never. Mike, if it helps, I don't think you're the only person it's just dawned on.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Karen McCarthy. There is a call for an independent process to be created to ensure the appointment of an appropriately skilled, high-performing New Zealand Rugby board. An independent review has found the constitution and consequent governance structures need a revamp, as they are not fit for purpose in the modern era. Review panel chair David Pilkington has told Checkpoint the recommendation was well thought through.
How could we change the format of the domestic game? How could we deal with this pressure that's coming, this economic pressure? To do that, we need a board with the best capability we can muster.
The review is also recommending a stakeholder council be created to ensure stakeholder voices are heard. Family doctors warn the increasing pressure on general practice is causing pain throughout the rest of the health system. A survey this month by GenPro, which represents the owners of general practices and urgent care centres, found nearly 90% are under major financial strain and 35% had made a financial loss in the last year. The chair of General Practice New Zealand, Brian Betty, says he's been told the same thing by GPs around the country in the last year.
And we've seen that across the system in terms of the pressures that, further practice closed books, which the survey confirms,
restricted access, pressures on EDs, pressures on hospitals, so the general practice sector is in quite a bit of difficulty at the moment.
Dr Betty, who works in Porirua, says the current funding model doesn't take into account increasing patient complexity, a key reason why a third of practices are currently closed to new patients. Advocates for 50 men caught up in an immigration scam in Auckland say it would never have happened if checks and balances had been in place. Immigration New Zealand is investigating the accredited employers scheme after Bangladeshi and Indian workers were found living in poor conditions in 2 houses after paying $20,000 to come to the country. Their employer has since vanished. Musad Alam from immigration law firm Amirans says the system which receives these visa applications is automated, so it didn't pick up on obvious red flags. He says when a company is offering jobs to 20 migrants and they can't afford 5 workers from New Zealand, a prudent review should be made. A property owner in a storm-hit part of coastal Auckland says recovery efforts are progressing slowly. Last week, Auckland Council unveiled a $2 billion package with government to buy out homes made uninhabitable by storms early this year. The package includes funds to repair damaged infrastructure and build resilience against future flooding. Rick Starr has a badge in the cyclone-hit community of Karikari on Auckland's west coast. He says the current plan brings more certainty to council rather than property owners.
Based on what we're seeing at Nurawai, there are no indications of how properties might be valued, no indication for what the discussion process might be, no timing for making offers.
Rick Starr says flood-affected communities need to be in sync with council when it comes to resourcing and visions for the future. Early childhood education teachers are disappointed the government has not guaranteed funding to maintain pay parity in the future. Associate Education Minister Joe Luxton has announced it will match the pay increases won by kindergarten and school teachers, but it says salary increases after December will need to be determined in future budgets. The Education Institute says without systems in place to ensure parity long-term, ECE teachers' wages will fall behind those of school teachers. The government also announced a review of the current funding model. Greenpeace activists have protested outside Parliament in Wellington before it adjourned for the election. Question time started at 2 p.m, where ministers and politicians gave their final remarks before the campaign gets into full swing. Activists from Greenpeace dropped 3 banners with the slogans "Too Many Cows" and "Climate Action Now" outside the public gallery. The group is calling for urgent action to cut climate pollution from dairy farmers. Spokesperson Christine Rose says all political parties need a plan to tackle climate pollution from big dairy. Tropical storm Idalia, now downgraded from a hurricane, has hit the US state of South Carolina. A storm surge has caused extensive flooding along the Atlantic coast, including in Charleston and Myrtle Beach. Hours earlier, Idalia caused widespread destruction on the Gulf Coast of Florida before sweeping across Georgia. Communities in the Big Bend region suffered catastrophic flooding. The BBC's Helena Humphrey is there.
Rebuilding will take a very long time. One power line worker I was talking to said when you expect to see a Category 3 storm, you can expect to wait 3 weeks, potentially even to get power back up. Category 4, then 4 weeks. And he said that in rural areas, and this is a rural area, you've got some people who are going to be sitting in the dark, potentially 4 months. Then you've got to get the water back on as well. So there is going to be a long way to go. In terms of destruction, we're talking billions of dollars worth of destruction.
5 railway workers have died in Italy after being hit by a high-speed train. They were carrying out maintenance work on the track near Turin when the accident happened. 2 other members of the crew narrowly escaped. And it'll be a slow journey home for motorists travelling to Auckland's North Shore after a multi-vehicle crash. Waka Kotahi says vehicles are blocking the right northbound lane just before the Otaheite Valley Road off-ramp after a truck rolled. It says there will be delays until the wreckage is cleared. That's the news.
This Saturday morning, high-profile forensic scientist Henry Lee, who now has to defend himself against allegations of fabricating evidence. Patrick DeWitt has a new, surprisingly mild-mannered novel out, The Librarianist. And Jonathan Shedler on the overuse of therapy speak. You may be triggered by this. Me, I'm in denial. Kokim Hillaho. Join me Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Lisa Owen is back with Checkpoint after an updated short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, mainly fine, isolated showers developing in Northland tomorrow morning, then spreading to northern Auckland and the Coromandel Peninsula late in the day. Showers turn to rain in the far north overnight Friday. Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Gisborne, mainly fine, cloud increasing late tomorrow. For Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Waitomo to Wellington, including Tamaranui and Taihape. Areas of cloud from Taranaki to Wellington with isolated showers until tomorrow morning, otherwise fine. Bulla and Westland, cloudy periods, isolated showers in Westland. Fiordland, showers turning to rain tomorrow morning, heavy falls in the south. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago except Clutha, mostly fine with morning frosts. Clutha and Southland, mainly fine at first, scattered rain developing tomorrow morning, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's 6:07.
Kia ora rā e ho. No mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. In developing news out of South Africa, more than 50 people have died in a fire in a block of flats in Johannesburg. More than 40 others have been injured. CNN is reporting that it started in a 5-storey building in the centre of the city. Emergency services are still trying to get the fire out and will keep you updated with any more information as it comes to hand. Back home now, and in the last month alone, 8 Kiwi have been found mauled by dogs in Northland's Opua Forest by Baybush Action Conservation Group. The group has spent 12 years working to restore the forest and had seen the number of Kiwi found in the bush go from virtually 0 to around 20. They say that having their work destroyed by owners failing to control their dogs is devastating. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went to visit them. And moving on to general practitioners. General practices are ailing, if not terminally ill in some cases. Nearly 90% of family doctors are under major financial pressure, with a third actually losing money in the last year. That's the stark finding from a new survey, with some clinics already on the brink of closure and GPs calling on the government to urgently increase funding. Ruth Hill reports.
Some GPs have been unable to pay themselves some weeks this year due to rising costs and funding shortfalls. Others are facing insolvency. A survey this month by GenPro, which represents the owners of general practices and urgent care centres, found 35% had made a financial loss in the last year, and more than half had been forced to cut services in the past 6 months. Its chair, Christchurch GP Angus Chambers, warns it's the most vulnerable patients who are most at risk of losing services because so-called very low-cost access clinics can't make ends meet on what they get from the government.
They are really struggling, and we've heard in our network that there are people contemplating withdrawing from that particular contract because they can no longer make ends meet. There's also talk of people withdrawing from the community services card contract and the free under 14 contract.
Of the 238 practices surveyed, 66% have increased fees in the last year, and 23% are about to do so. In a written statement to RNZ, Health Minister Aisha Verrill agrees the funding system for GPs is not fit for purpose, but funding alone is a blunt tool. She says the government is boosting the number of GP training places to 300 by 2026, supporting overseas trained doctors to work as GPs and investigating new models of care. But General Practice New Zealand Chair Brian Betty warns some GPs won't be around to see these lofty goals realised.
I'm a supporter of the capitation system, but the way it is structured is certainly not fit for purpose. It does have to be rectified because that is the foundation on which the system is based. So look, it's not a blunt tool. It's actually the tool that needs to be worked on very seriously to alleviate some of the pressures.
Dr Betty, who works in a very low-cost access practice in Porirua, says the current funding model doesn't take into account increasing patient complexity, a key reason why a third of practices are currently closed to new patients. The GenPro survey also found 43% of practices had nursing vacancies, while 60% had GP vacancies. College of GPs President Luke Bradford, a family doctor in Tauranga, says there have been numerous reports in the last decade calling for urgent reforms in primary care.
And it's been deferred and deferred and deferred, and we now have an aspirational paper which is talking about a 10-year time frame to implement when we've got huge demands and unmet need currently for patients and an ageing and burnt out and retiring workforce.
GenPro's Angus Chambers says the government's Superior report in 2022 found GPs were doing about half their work for free.
I'm perplexed. The crisis is real. The workforce issues are significant. There are already people who can't get GPs. There's many people who can't enrol in a general practice, and it's going to get worse, and yet they talk about more plans and more reviews, and they'll probably do a review of the review before they actually get around to doing anything.
Dr Chambers says funding to general practice needs to be increased by 20 to 25% just to get stability. That's 5 times the increase they got in July, 5%.
The Australian competition regulator, ACCC, is taking Qantas to court, alleging the airline advertised tickets for more than 8,000 flights that it had already cancelled, but had not removed from sale. The ABC's Peter Ryan has more.
This goes to the travel chaos and anxiety that Qantas customers have been experiencing. The ACCC's alleging that Qantas sold tickets for an average of 2 weeks and up to 47 days after they were cancelled between May and July last year. Also that Qantas allegedly cancelled 15,000 of 66,000 scheduled flights for the same period. The ACCC claims for 10,000 cancellations, it took an average of 18 days and up to 48 days to notify ticket holders. The ACCC cites one example where travellers for a Qantas flight from Melbourne to Los Angeles on May the 6th, 2022 were notified of the cancellation 2 days before on May the 4th. And that was 4 days after the flight had actually been cancelled in the first place. Another where a consumer was given a replacement flight a day before their original departure date, and that only came via the Qantas app. ACCC Chair Gina Cass-Gottlieb is accusing Qantas of false, misleading and deceptive conduct.
This conduct is serious enough and important enough, given how essential for Australians reliable air travel is, that we should commence proceedings. There are absolute obligations under the Australian consumer law to accurately inform consumers of the services that have been sold and to update consumers. We also allege and are aware that Qantas had the capacity, because at other times they did inform consumers promptly in relation to cancellation.
It could be $10 million per offence. So with 8,000 alleged breaches, that could theoretically be $80 billion with a B, which is off the scale, of course, and would never happen. But even in the best case scenario for Qantas, it could be tens of millions of dollars. Qantas issued a statement saying it's taking the allegations seriously, noting that the period in question was a time of unprecedented upheaval for the entire aviation industry. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, says the allegations are, quote, deeply concerning, but the ACCC's doing its job in taking Qantas to court.
It is 14 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Africa has experienced another military coup, this time in Gabon. It comes just over a month after the military seized power in Niger. The ousted leader, 64-year-old President Ali Bongo, has called for his supporters to make noise. Deutsche Welle's Stephen Gislam reports.
Jubilant scenes on the streets of the Gabonese capital. After nearly 56 years of Bongo family rule, the political dynasty was overthrown by its own presidential Republican Guard. After so much time, many there are excited at the prospect of change.
This is Independence Day. The army has freed our country. We are free. We have the right to be free and to express ourselves the way we want.
We've had enough of the PDG party. They've ruled us for decades, even if they never won any elections.
While many of Libreville's residents are celebrating, the sentiment is not shared by everyone. The US and Russia expressed concern, while the EU said it may impose sanctions. The African Union and the UN condemned the coup, and Nigeria's president expressed alarm over what he called contagious autocracy. If successful, This will be the 6th African country where the military has seized power since 2020. The ousted president, now under house arrest, called for his supporters to take action.
I'm Ali Bongo Ondimba, president of Gabon, and I'm to send a message to all the friends that we have all over the world to tell them to make noise, for the people here have arrested me.
He had claimed victory in last weekend's elections, but just minutes after the announcement was made, senior military officers released this statement.
Au nom du peuple gabonais.
In the name of the Gabonese people, we have decided to defend peace by putting an end to the current regime. The general elections of August 26, 2023, as well as the truncated results, are cancelled. The borders are closed until further notice. All institutions of the Republic are dissolved.
In Gabon, many now hope for a brighter future, but the international community can only watch on with bated breath.
Ugandan authorities have charged a 20-year-old man with aggravated homosexuality, which carries a possible death penalty under the East African nation's new anti-gay law. LGBTQ people in Uganda have been feeling even more persecuted since the legislation was enacted in late May. Deutsche Welle's Florian Norfhoff reports.
The storm surge was always the biggest threat. And as expected, Idalia has brought serious flooding.
Beyond these gates, a hostile environment. This compound in the Ugandan capital, Kampala, provides refuge to members of the LGBT community, long a persecuted group in the African country. Now, a new law not only raises the risk level, it's also pushing queer people out of their homes, says the man who established a safe house. Fearing reprisals, he wishes to remain anonymous.
Now you see most of the LGBT people have been evacuated from their places of stay. Reason being, if they find out that you've been in that house and you're gay, another thing they do is now starting attacking you.
Uganda is regarded as one of the most homophobic countries in the world. Harsh anti-gay legislation and queer bashing by politicians and religious leaders have led to discrimination, even violence. Introducing the death sentence for gay sex has caused outrage in the international community. Support from abroad has done little to shield queer people in Uganda from increased persecution. Safe spaces like these have become more valuable than ever.
For us losing this place, we're going to be like losing our safe havens, because we have tried different places, but we have failed to get a place which can host us.
With support infrastructure crumbling under the latest legal assault, Uganda's LGBT community is fast running out of options.
Former Hurricane Idalia is moving away from Florida and into Georgia and has been downgraded to a tropical storm. The wind speed is slowing a little, but the devastation continues. It is the strongest storm to make landfall in Florida in 100 years. The BBC's John Sudworth reports.
The storm surge was always the biggest threat. And as expected, Idalia has brought serious flooding to Florida's west coast. These residents are being brought out of the evacuation zone, an area where the authorities had been telling people for days that it wasn't safe to stay in their homes.
Hey, puppy, you're okay, buddy. About 3 o'clock, the water was still 2 feet below the seawall. So I went back to bed, and he woke me up about 7:30 and said, "We got water in the house." So that's where we're at.
So did you guys not get the warnings to leave?
Sure. Yes, but we left the last one and didn't have to, so we thought we'd be able to sit it out.
Don't ever trust the weatherman.
The whole front building of the faraway end where the swings were just came apart, and it's washing up the street toward us.
The hurricane made landfall on what's known as Florida's Big Bend, a relatively less populated area of the coast, but once again the warnings were clear. The floods pose a major threat to life. But while many thousands have followed the advice, others, worried about damage or looting, have taken their chances with the storm.
This is one of those things, in Florida, we live with these storms, we live in Florida because we don't like snow, but in the fall, we have to deal with storms like this. And unfortunately, these storms move about. They come to the left, they go to the right, we don't know which way they're going. And so a lot of times people just become, it's not going to hit us, it's not going to hit us. Well, sometimes we get punched in the mouth.
Another rescue vehicle is heading into the flooded area. They tell us they've brought out around 40 trapped residents so far. More are still inside, a clear illustration of the dangers of not heeding those warnings. The damage to property is expected to be severe, and tens of thousands of engineers and members of the National Guard are on standby to deal with the aftermath.
The UK's Foreign Minister James Cleverly is currently in China. The first senior British minister to visit Beijing in 5 years. He says he's been raising human rights concerns with his Chinese counterpart, but also that Britain needed a pragmatic relationship with China to tackle issues like climate change. The BBC's Stephen McDonnell reports from Beijing.
From the opening meeting at the Great Hall of the People, the Foreign Secretary's Chinese hosts were publicly very upbeat about the importance of this trip. Vice President Han Zheng was the first to sit across the table from James Cleverly. He told the Foreign Secretary his visit would help promote stable relations between China and the UK, as well as improve economic ties. Mr Cleverly has been criticised at home for coming, but he said without such face-to-face interaction, there was a greater chance of misinterpretations, mistrust and errors. Ahead of his meeting with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi, he promised to raise the issue of human rights abuses against ethnic Uyghurs in Xinjiang and the erosion of freedoms in Hong Kong. He also told the BBC he'd urge Beijing to use its influence with Russia to stop the invasion of Ukraine, despite the support offered by China to the Kremlin.
I don't think it's in China's interest in any way for there to be a perception that they are actively or even passively supporting Putin's brutal actions. And I made that point.
Does Beijing care about that? I mean, look, they...
Oh, I do think, in the conversations I've had, I think Beijing do care about what the world thinks of them.
Mr Cleverly said China was at the forefront of green energy technology, but he hoped it would be much more courageous in a move away from polluting industries. And he said Beijing needed to build trust when it came to cooperation, if it wanted to trade successfully during a very tough economic climate.
In Germany, a far-right political party that some describe as neo-Nazi is soaring in the polls. AfD, which stands for Alternative for Germany, is the second most popular party, with 1 in 5 people saying they will vote for it. That's sending shockwaves through Germany's establishment, with predictions the party could be running entire states as early as next year. The ABC's Eric Campbell reports.
We're on the roof of Germany's Parliament building, the Reichstag, and adoring teenagers are lining up for selfies with Beatrix von Storch, deputy leader of the AfD.
The government is losing track, and the opposition party which is gaining is not the CDU of the former Chancellor Merkel, but it's our AfD, because people realise that we are the only ones who will not go into alliance with the Greens and keep on going with mass migration and energy politics like the government is actually doing.
The AfD is unlike any other major German party. It wants to end all migration, except for migrants with €5 million. And it wants to stop any action on climate change, which it claims is a hoax. But it's not just the AfD's policies causing alarm in the establishment, it's the membership. The Federal Intelligence Service claims a third of its 30,000 members are known far-right extremists. In the federal state of Thuringia in eastern Germany, the State Intelligence Service has even declared it a far-right extremist group. Stefan Kramer is the intelligence director.
I'm very alarmed because the AfD, a proven right-wing extremist party by my domestic intelligence, is the biggest opposition party in our state parliament. We're talking about Nazis in suits, basically in the parliaments.
Beatrix von Storch rejects the extremist label, arguing the AfD's migration policies, for example, are not very different to Australia's.
People are not starting traveling towards Australia because they know no one will come in without any visa. So are you a state of law, or what is kind of Australia, something like a criminal country, or should we blame Australia for this migration politics? Are you just all racist, and are you all just right-wing extremists?
Until now, all major parties have refused to work with the AfD, vowing there will be no cooperation and certainly no coalition. But that could be tested next year when 4 of Germany's 16 federal states hold elections. In Thuringia, it looks like the AfD will win outright, making it Stefan Kramer's new boss.
I'm a Jew. My personal red line, and that for my family, will be that at that moment when the AfD becomes a government part in Germany, either on state or on federal level, we will leave the country.
As Germany's economy sinks deeper into recession and the Ukraine war pushes energy prices even higher, the AfD's popularity is likely to increase. For the first time since World War II, there is now a real prospect of a far-right party coming into power.
Netflix says its attempt to succeed in the video gaming industry is a natural extension of its subscription platform. The streaming service has offered games on mobile versions of its app for 2 years. Now it's hoping to become a front-runner in the gaming market, despite seeing other big entertainment companies try and fail at the same challenge. The BBC's gaming correspondent Stefan Powell reports.
Think of Netflix and its shows like Stranger Things.
Don't try to be heroes.
And The Crown that might spring to mind.
For years I've called for a more modern monarchy.
Not necessarily video games. But now development studios like Ripstone in Liverpool are making games for the streaming service. They're playable on mobile phones and tablets only for now. Here, it's a chess simulator based on the Netflix drama The Queen's Gambit. The idea is clear. To stay relevant, Netflix wants a legitimate stake in an industry that hundreds of millions of people around the globe access every day. Leanne Loom is from the company.
Games is a really huge part of entertainment, and so it really is a natural progression for us to start thinking about how to offer games to our members.
But Netflix isn't the first mainstream entertainment or technology company to have this idea.
What is Eternum?
Amazon and Google are just 2 others that have tried. Earlier this year, Google's Stadia service was shut down, and Amazon Games has laid off workers. Making the transition is difficult, according to the games journalist Shay Thompson.
They fundamentally misunderstood what it is about games that people love in the first place. They had big budgets behind them, but ultimately lacked creativity and uniqueness.
By focusing on games for mobile devices, though, Netflix is trying something different. They're cheaper and quicker to make than their console or PC counterparts, so easier to grow a portfolio. But there is a risk this lack of scale and ambition could see them fail to grab players' attention in such a crowded marketplace.
Oh, we've had a text from down south. This listener says the gorgeous blue moon is now gracing the mid-Canterbury horizon. Wow, soak it in. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First ups in the US. Hawaii is recovering from fire as Storm Idalia hammers South Carolina. Meanwhile, the Bulls in court at the US Open in New York. That is a buffet of breakfast served with your coffee. 5 a.m. tomorrow. Do tune in. You won't want to miss it. We'll catch you a little later on Friday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. An independent review has found New Zealand Rugby's constitution and governance structures are not fit for purpose in the modern era. The review calls for changes to ensure the appointment of an appropriately skilled, high-performing New Zealand Rugby board. Immigration New Zealand is investigating the accredited employers scheme after about 50 Bangladeshi and Indian workers were found living in poor conditions in 2 houses. They each paid $20,000 to come to the country, and their employer has vanished. Emergency services in the South African city of Johannesburg say more than 50 people have died in a fire in a 5-storey block of flats, and many others are injured. The cause of the fire is under investigation. And a multi-vehicle crash is delaying traffic to Auckland's North Shore. Waka says